Welcome back to Mackey's Motors in my tiny garage on a breezy day in New Jersey. We had quite a nice weekend. I was able to put up a portable garage so I can store some stuff and make a little extra room in my tiny shop here. But gotta get back to work. So, with my students and with anybody else following along, we talked about some major components of an engine and how they work together. We talked about valves, cylinder heads, pistons, cylinder. So now that we can identify a lot of the parts, we need to know why they're there and what they do. So the next logical step forward is learning what a four-stroke engine is. The most common engine on planet Earth is a four-stroke. Now we do have two-stroke engines, but I'm not going to get into those too much because aside from lawn equipment, some off-road equipment, most mechanics only encounter them for hobbies or for, helping somebody out. But in garages and in, your everyday life, the four-stroke engine is the most common engine you're going to come across. My students have learned about different style engines or different types of engines. Talking about V6s and V8s and inline four cylinders, inline sixes, straight sixes, rotary engines, opposed engines. There's so many different styles, but they all have one thing in common. They need four strokes to operate. So what this lesson today is, we're going to cover the four strokes and we're going to talk about how everything works in unison to create energy. So I'm going to erase this here on my fancy whiteboard. And we're going to talk about the four strokes. So let's label them 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's get right into it. The very first stroke, in order for an engine to start creating power, is intake. We need to have air and fuel to make an engine run. After we have air and fuel, we need an ignition source to create an explosion, and then we need a way to expel the gases after the explosion. So, how is the best way to memorize the four strokes? I'm going to teach you the same way I learned. Just simply say, suck, squeeze, bang, blow. It sounds silly, but you'll never forget it. Suck, squeeze, bang, blow. So, we need something called a stoichiometric ratio. Our atmospheric pressure is always 14.7 psi, which is what you're breathing in. It's the air around you. In order to have a stoichiometric ratio, for 1 part of oxygen or air, atmospheric pressure, or for that 14 pounds, you need 1 part fuel. That would create the perfect burn. So we have this ratio called a stoichiometric ratio. When our engine wants to run, we need to make that ratio so that it burns the cleanest, uses up the oxygen and the fuel, and creates the most power. So we have all different systems in place to try to meet that ratio. How do we begin the process? Well, you got to bring it into the engine. So we have fuel and we have air. How do we get it inside the engine? The very first stroke is called the intake stroke. As we spoke earlier in my video about engine components, we have 2 valves on every cylinder, at least 2 valves. The intake stroke is exactly what it says. It's taking something in. How do we force air and fuel inside an engine? It's really, really simple. We create vacuum. So, intake valve allows air and fuel to pass through into the combustion chamber. How do we get that to happen? We create vacuum in the cylinder by making the piston go downward. On its downward stroke, the first stroke, it creates vacuum inside that cylinder, and it wants to fill that vacuum immediately with air and fuel that we provided for it. So the intake valve opens up as the piston travels downward, and it intakes the air and the fuel. Boom, intake stroke. After the intake stroke, the piston wants to travel back up. Now, when it reaches all the way at the bottom, we call that bottom dead center. That's when the piston can't go down anymore and it starts traveling upward. The piston wants to come all the way back up to the top, which is called top dead center. But if our intake valve is open, then we're going to push all of our air and fuel out that we just sucked in. So we have a special timing mechanism on the engine somewhere, either in the middle of the engine or on top of the engine, called a camshaft. The camshaft allows the valves to close. So the intake valve will then close as the piston starts to travel up, and the piston will then squeeze all of the air and fuel really, really tightly up to the cylinder head. It's called the combustion chamber. That squeezing part is called compression. The compression stroke forces all of that oxygen and fuel squished together right up to the bottom of our ignition source called the spark plug. Our spark plug receives a signal from the computer, from the ignition module, from wherever. That signal gets sent into a coil. That coil then fires the spark plug. Now, both of our valves are closed. Air and fuel is trapped in there. A little spark happens. Boom! We create an explosion. Explosion happens right as the piston is traveling to the very, very tippy top. So, the next stroke is called the power stroke or combustion. It's called the power stroke because this is the only stroke that is actually generating energy and forcing now the piston to travel downward. Everything up until this point has been inertia created by a starter motor or created by a previous cycle. So this is the only stroke that is actually creating the power in the engine. So a lot of people refer to it the power. The technical term is combustion. After the combustion stroke, piston is traveling down really, really fast now, creating that power, and the piston goes to bottom dead center and reciprocating motion wants to come back up. Well, we just had an explosion inside the cylinder, so that means the air and the fuel are now exhaust gases. Exhaust gases expand and it wants to escape. So the last stroke is to get that exhaust out, and it is called the exhaust stroke. Intake, compression, combustion, exhaust. The exhaust valve opens up, the cam is timed, and it allows the valve, it pushes the valve down, allows the exhaust to escape out of the cylinder, and everything starts over again. So the 4 strokes make an engine create suction, suck, it then squeezes it together, squeeze, there's a bang, and then the piston comes up as a compressor and blows it out because the exhaust valve is open. So our 4 strokes, pretty simple. Suck, squeeze, bang, blow, intake, compression, combustion, exhaust. Now, as I said, only 1 stroke creates the power. All the others are inertia. But once that power stroke is happening, everything else just follows through. We have a crankshaft at the bottom of the engine that's holding all of the pistons in line. That crankshaft spins in a circle, and the pistons go up and down. It's a reciprocating motion. And there are special weights on a crankshaft that are called counterbalances. And the counterbalances are what help the intake and the exhaust strokes continue their motion. So, anyway, those are the 4 strokes. And we're going to talk about our intake and combustion stroke next. I'm going to show you how we get air and fuel into the cylinder. So, I have a very special guest here today. This is my twin brother, Rich Mackey. He's a captain on the Newark Fire Department. And Mackey's Motors and our channel, my viewers would like to thank our essential personnel and our lifesavers sincerely from the bottom of our hearts for everything you guys are doing and for the hard work and the tasks you guys are facing. Thank you very, very much, twin bro.
Thank you. Thank you all. Everybody chipping in some way or form is fantastic. I can't stress enough, as big of a pain in the butt as it's been, if you don't have to go somewhere, stay home. If you don't have to be anywhere, don't get out in your car and drive around. Don't hang out with a whole group of people. This is a very difficult time, especially for essential personnel, just in the sense that we also have our families to go home to. We don't want to be bringing anything home we don't have to. But it's a trying time for everybody. And I can't stress enough, check on the elderly, call them, see them from a distance, especially older family members, anybody like that. Try to keep more than 6 feet of distance. That's very important because we don't want to lose family. That's the biggest thing. We have a lot of firefighters who have gotten sick, a lot of police officers who have gotten sick, but more so our healthcare workers, the people you go to for help, are getting sick. And we don't want to inundate them with unnecessary illness. And that's only caused by people just not following those simple guidelines. Stay away. I am so sorry for everybody that your school year is being held up. My kids, I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old who both cried today because they actually won't be able to go back to school. My 9-year-old is graduating to middle school, so he won't get his clap out from his elementary school, and my daughter's graduating kindergarten. And, you know, she's sad because they get a whole ceremony and she's not going to be able to cap and gown for her ceremony. I feel for any of you seniors and even younger freshmen and sophomores who are going to their next level. It's kind of like a rite of passage every year, but we adapt. We overcome. Just like a mechanic. You got a problem, you work through it. So the best I could say is keep your social distance. If you have to go somewhere, if it's necessary to go shopping, make sure you use the proper protection. Face masks are very important. Gloves, if you have them, are very important because you don't know what other people touch. Simple things like that. Wash your hands frequently. Thank you all, and be safe, stay healthy.
Thank you to all of our firemen and everybody else, especially the North Fire Department, which is very close to my heart, and anybody else that's out there volunteering, working in the hospitals and everywhere else. We thank everybody for their hard work. Stay healthy, stay safe, and everybody else, stay home. Watch my videos. Like and subscribe.
Don't forget to thank your teachers, because they're all doing this from home. Everybody's adapting, and here I am sitting in a nice old rickety garage with a teacher. Who else does this? Congratulations, be safe, stay healthy.
Bro. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Have fun.
Wash your hands.